This house belongs to me. Hurry up and go back to your own homes. When I shouted in frustration, my daughter-in-law Emma said, Obviously, this house is better. If you don't like it, why don't you leave, mother-in-law? From now on, my sons and I will live in this house. Unwanted people, please leave.
Leave quickly. We'll handle the mortgage payments. Just because you've been paying something like rent doesn't mean you can act all high and mighty.
Can't believe what my daughter-in-law and grandchildren, who had always relied on me for everything in their lives, are saying. I was dumbfounded. Fine, I got it. Please handle all the future payments. I'll transfer all the property rights to the two of you. While saying this, I couldn't help but think, just rent? Well, it's $6,000 a month. All the procedures are done. From now on, I entrust everything to you. I will never associate with you ever again. Goodbye. Feeling their smirking gazes, I left the room. My name is Mia. I'm turning 73 this year. Officially, I'm unemployed. When I was young, I fell in love with a man I met in a company research lab, and we got married. Soon after, I got pregnant. Back then, there weren't maternity leave systems like today, and having a research job was tough. So I resigned and took on jobs like translating documents at home while raising my child. Technical documents with specialized terms required considerable knowledge to translate. Because of my research background and my husband being in the same field, I was trusted, securing a stable income. After our son, Chris, was born, we built a house slightly away from the city center.
When you're free, you can write reports at home. When research gets busy, you'll be stuck at the office. This way there's balance.
My husband laughed, a typical scientist. And so we continued this life until his retirement. After retirement, just like me, he also took on contract work from home. My husband passed away 3 years ago, and I decided to move to my current apartment. My son Chris married when he was 28.
I'm thinking of getting married. Actually, we're expecting a child.
My husband and I were very surprised, but we were overjoyed by the good news. Soon after, Chris brought his fiancée, Emma, to introduce her to us. I'm Emma. Nice to meet you. Please take care of me. Emma was a sophisticated beauty, the very image of a city girl. It was unexpected for Chris to choose someone like her, but what surprised us even more was her age. I'm 18 years old. Why would Chris, 10 years her senior, be with a teenager? However, Emma was already pregnant. It wouldn't be right for us as parents to oppose when they both wished for it. Though my husband and I were a bit perplexed, we blessed Chris and Emma. That evening, the two of them stayed at our house, but Emma mostly looked at her phone and hardly conversed with us. She then commented, Why did you build a house in such a countryside? Even if I inherit this house in the future, it's too rural and it would just be problematic. Both my husband and I were too shocked and astounded to reply.
Emma, I have frequent transfers right now, so it's difficult, but I also want my own house someday. This is my parents' house, and I don't know if I'll inherit it or not.
Chris tried to reason with her. In that case, we can live in the house Chris builds and just sell this one. At Emma's words, neither I, my husband, nor even Chris could respond. Would Chris really be okay marrying a girl like her? I was concerned, but couldn't voice it out. It seemed my husband felt the same, and we decided to simply watch over them silently for now. Shortly after, as Emma entered the stable period of her pregnancy, and her belly wasn't too noticeable yet, they had their wedding ceremony and reception at a city hotel that had a sudden cancellation. Emma was undeniably beautiful, so the wedding ceremony was exceptionally splendid. The wedding went smoothly without any issues, and my husband and I returned to our home. Meanwhile, Chris went back to the apartment he rented in the city to start his new life with Emma. At that time, Chris was on a temporary assignment in a provincial city. But because Emma disliked living there, they decided to rent a place in the city. After the ceremony and a week-long vacation, Chris returned to his work in the provincial city. Thus, the two began their married life living separately. After all, I have a baby in my belly, right? What if there's no hospital in such a rural place? What if something happens and we can't get medical help in time? Wouldn't it be fine for her to live with Chris, at least initially? That was my suggestion, but Emma's response was as stated above. Given the concern for the child, it was hard to argue against that. As a result, while Chris was away for work, my husband and I supported Emma. Chris, how did you and Emma meet? Where did you meet, and what led to your relationship? After their marriage, during one of Chris's solo visits to our home, I asked him this. Since they had decided to marry quickly before their child was born, I hadn't had a chance to learn about their relationship in detail. Chris had come home at this time hoping to be with his wife before the birth, but Emma had told him, "Ugh, why did you come back unexpectedly? I didn't think you'd come home, so I made plans to travel with friends. After the birth, I might not be able to go out easily." So he came to our house instead. According to Chris, they met at a place he visited for a company dinner. Emma was working there as a part-time employee.
She introduced herself as Emma there, and I thought it was a fake name, but it turned out to be her real name. When I mentioned it was unusual for her to use her real name, she said she wasn't embarrassed about her job, so she used her actual name. That's when I began to like her. After getting her contact information, he visited the place a few more times. At one point, she approached him saying, "Hey, what do you think of me, Chris? I might have fallen for you." As their relationship grew closer, she revealed, "Actually, I'm pregnant." That led to their decision to marry. My husband and I were quite shocked, but we told him, "Don't worry about the circumstances of how you met. What matters is how you, Chris, will make Emma and your upcoming child happy in the future." We decided not to discuss their meeting any further. Even after that, Chris continued to get transferred for work, but Emma never once accompanied him. "I can't possibly move with the twins. It's just not feasible." Indeed, Emma became the mother of twin boys. "I named them Liam and Noah. Cool, right?" These days, no one could criticize her, but Emma decided on their names without consulting Chris. Chris started living at his own house when the sons reached middle school age. Man, it's tough when Dad's around. Totally. He complains about everything. Can't stand it. Exactly. Better when he's gone. Wish he'd go back to living alone. The sons treated their father like he was in the way, and Emma told him, "With 4 adults in the house, it's too cramped. Why don't you go to your parents on the weekends?" Consequently, Chris often returned to our place. Honestly, I feel more at ease at my parents' house.
Seeing the lonely figure of Chris, both my husband and I felt sorry for him. But this was a decision Chris had made, and as his parents, we couldn't interfere. It was heart-wrenching, but all we could do was watch in silence. Around this time, my husband Bob reached his retirement age. With Chris coming back, it was a joy to finally spend quality time as father and son. However, seeing our son being treated poorly by his wife and children made us feel a mix of emotions as time went by. And then, 3 years ago, Bob passed away.
I feel like I'm catching a cold.
After saying that, his health rapidly deteriorated, and he passed away suddenly. I was in shock and could only cry.
Mom, constant crying won't bring Dad peace. I want you to live long for both yourself and Dad. So even though it's tough, please look ahead.
Around that time, Chris received an offer to work overseas. Unlike his previous assignments, he wouldn't be able to return home for 3 years.
It would ease my mind if you were in the city, Mom. There are big hospitals and Emma and the boys are there. I know it might not be much, but if things get really tough, please reach out.
Encouraged by Chris, I left the house where I'd lived for many years and moved to a condo near Chris's place. I purchased a unit in a newly built condo located in a convenient part of the city center. Wow, mother-in-law, that's amazing!
Right? I'd be so happy living here. Me too. I want to brag to my friends.
My grandchildren, who are now in high school, said in unison. What surprised me was that even Emma said, "Mother-in-law, it must be lonely living here by yourself. Let's live together." She barely ever associated with me before, but now that I've bought a new apartment, she's like this? I was flabbergasted. And by the way, mother-in-law, isn't the loan for this place high? How much is it? Her ulterior motive was clear. Well, maybe around the cost of rent? I avoided giving the exact amount and responded vaguely. Oh, I see. When can we move in then? She's really set on living here. I'd appreciate it if you refrained. I had no idea I would come to regret this rejection. Understood. We'll hold off then. I was relieved when Emma readily agreed, but at this point, she had misunderstood hold off as gradually. Who could have imagined that? When life in the apartment had started to settle, Emma and the 2 grandchildren began visiting more frequently.
How are you, Grandma? Feeling good? You haven't been feeling ill or anything, right?
Thank you, I'm as lively as ever. I was genuinely delighted by their words. I believed they were genuinely concerned about my well-being. Initially, the 3 of them would visit, have some tea, and leave after a short while. However, these visits started to stretch longer. They began to have lunch and then dinner, and eventually started asking,
It's getting late. Can we stay the night?
I thought, why not just once? But after I allowed it, the frequency increased, and before I knew it, they were staying over more often than not. Emma, isn't it about time you checked on your own house? It's fine. Besides, don't you think you should get out of the house every now and then? If you don't, you'll grow mold. Interestingly, she started making more remarks trying to get me out of the house.
Grandma, can I have some pocket money? Me too, me too.
Both grandkids started asking me for money. I didn't give them much, but I did hand over some occasionally. After all, grandchildren are so precious. They would shower me with affectionate words, making me want to spoil them even more. I realized that I also had a part to play in this. Within a year in this lax situation, the 3 of them had essentially moved into my apartment. While they would go back to their homes or go out, they ultimately returned to my apartment. However, there was one thing I never compromised on. I never gave them keys to my place. This is my home. The 3 of you have your own place. When I'm not here, please return to your own homes and don't come into mine. I was firm on this boundary. If not, I had an innate feeling that someday they might take over my apartment completely. A year later, Noah and Liam graduated from high school. What do you 2 plan to do after graduation? Both of them didn't seem to be preparing for exams or job hunting, so I once asked out of concern. They responded,
Oh, we've already decided our path. Don't worry about it.
Furthermore, Emma told me, I am their mother, so please refrain from making unnecessary comments. It left me with no choice but to remain silent. Another 2 years passed, and while the grandchildren appeared to be occasionally busy with something, they neither seemed to be attending college nor holding down a steady job. Emma seemed to be out enjoying herself most of the time, leaving all the household responsibilities to me. Emma, have you been in contact with Chris? There's a time difference, so it's challenging. But please, don't concern yourself with it. It felt like talking to a brick wall. Would this situation continue until Chris returns? After enduring for another 2 years, I received a message from Chris saying he would be returning soon. Finally, all 4 of us can live together as a family. That's wonderful. To my words, the 3 of them clearly showed disgust. Do you not like the idea? Of course we don't. While I was rendered speechless, the 2 grandchildren chimed in.
I thought something might happen to Grandma before Dad comes back. Seriously, you've been so lively all along. If you had become weaker, we might have gotten this apartment. Well, it won't be much longer now. The 2 of them laughed and seemed to be enjoying the conversation. Then it dawned on me. Their seemingly caring words were all in hopes that I'd weaken and be out of the picture. I was at a loss for words. There were times I was so distressed that I felt my health would deteriorate, but I endured, thinking it was all just until Chris returned. This house is mine. Go back to your own home immediately. When I screamed out of exasperation, my daughter-in-law Emma retorted, Obviously, this house is better. If you don't like it, why don't you leave? From now on, my sons and I will live in this house. Anyone extra should leave. Just leave already. We'll handle the mortgage payments. Don't act all high and mighty just because you've been paying some rent. Was this really coming from my daughter-in-law and grandchildren who had depended on me for everything? I was taken aback. Fine, I get it. I'll make sure all payments from now on are your responsibility. I'll also transfer the ownership to both of you. As I said this, I couldn't help but think, just rent money, huh?
Well, it's $6,000 a month. Seeing me seemingly give in, the three of them gleefully exclaimed, "Yes!"
Thank you, Grandma. Thank you so much.
I made up my mind and proceeded to do what needed to be done. All the procedures are completed. I trust you'll handle everything from now on. I won't associate with any of you ever again. Farewell. Feeling their smug gazes on me, I left the room. A month later, as expected, a frantic Emma called me. "Mother-in-law, explain this." "What are you talking about?" "About the apartment." "So, what about it?" "Stop playing games." Emma on the other side of the phone was furious. "I got a call from some unfamiliar company telling me if I can't pay the loan, I should leave the house." "Well, that's to be expected." "Explain it to me." "What's there to explain? It's only natural that you'd be told that if you can't pay the loan," I said dismissively. "When you take out a mortgage to buy a house, you have to pay a fixed amount every month. You knew that. You said you'd handle the payments, didn't you?" "Yes, but the amount is too high. I can't believe you were paying this much before," Emma exclaimed in anger. "The mortgage is just around the rent amount. Only $6,000, right?" "Only $6,000?" Her scream was deafening. "What do you mean, only $6,000? What do you mean it's just rent? Did you deceive me?" "No, it's just a typical rent price. It's the rent for a condo in a prime location downtown. That much is expected. It wouldn't even be surprising if the rent for an upper floor was over $10,000. That's roughly the market rate around here. Look it up." "You're kidding me." Emma was in shock. The real surprise was on me. How could she not have noticed this? "Anyway, how are Noah and Liam? You said their futures were settled, so I changed the ownership. How are they doing?" I didn't let up on my offensive. "By the way, in addition to the loan, don't forget about the management fees and the repair reserve payments." "What is that?" "Condominiums have necessary expenses. There are also property taxes, utility bills, insurance, and other payments to consider. So work together and do your best." "Ah!" She doesn't respond. It seems she's in shock. "Emma, can you hear me?" "Mother-in-law, What? Can you come back to this condo? Can you live with us again? The three of us can't handle the finances." "I see, but I decided not to get involved ever again." She should remember that promise. "Anyway, do your best with the three of you. Let Noah and Liam know. Goodbye." "Mother-in-law, wait!" I hung up the phone and immediately blocked Emma, Noah, and Liam. I felt relieved. Not long after, Chris returned to the country and divorced Emma. I also filed a suit in the family court to deny any connection with the two grandchildren. Chris wasn't the father of Noah and Liam. Emma had once fallen for the top stripper at a club and became pregnant with his child. But for the stripper, Emma was just another client, so he denied paternity. Emma then targeted Chris, who happened to visit the club, claimed the child was his, and even led the story to marriage. My son was truly pitiful. It seemed that Chris had genuinely fallen for Emma and had never doubted her. Coincidentally, Noah and Liam looked so much like Emma, and they weren't completely dissimilar to Chris, so there was no room for suspicion. The names Noah and Liam seemed to have been taken from their real father, the stripper. Emma often told her two sons how cool this stripper named Ryan was, and it seemed she told them they could make a lot of money if they ever became the top stripper. Taking it to heart, the two sons started working part-time at Ryan's club, but apparently they were of no use. After returning home and hearing the story from me, Chris decided on a divorce. At the time he was gathering evidence, Emma was seen pleading with Ryan, so he managed to capture that scene as evidence. Chris then demanded a blood test from Noah, Liam, and Ryan, and it was clearly revealed the true parent-child relationship. And so Chris sought compensation from Emma. Emma had deceived Chris for a long 20 years. The amount of compensation for that was astronomical, and Chris didn't actually think he could claim the full amount, but it was a matter of principle. Now I've moved back to the house where I originally lived with my husband, and I'm living with Chris. Although we moved away when we lived in the city center condominium, we never sold it. As part of the inheritance from my husband, the title had been transferred to Chris. I inherited something different from my husband. When he was in his research lab, he had patented something, and what I inherited was the right to receive the patent fee. The amount was so large that you could live a life of leisure for a lifetime, but my husband, who was a born researcher, continued his personal research even after retirement, alongside translating academic papers. There are also patent fees for minor patents related to that. The same goes for me. The academic translations I continue to work on are highly appreciated. Combining those incomes, there was no need to pay the mortgage for that condo. It seemed Emma and her group misunderstood that I, being unemployed, was paying a cheap mortgage with my pension. Chris is angry with Emma, but he says he is also to blame for neglecting his family for work and quit his job. Now he's working for a company near his parents' house and seems to be taking the time to think about how to live from now on. A few years later, Chris ended up remarrying a female colleague. His spouse also had a past where she was harassed by her ex-husband, and they divorced. They seemed to have clicked instantly. Now they have built a marital relationship as close as old friends. And then a lovely grandchild was born. Now I live with my son, his wife, and my beloved grandchild, the four of us together. My granddaughter toddles around, and with a lisping voice calls out, "Grandma, Grandma," clinging to me. Every day I'm so smitten with her that I truly feel the saying, "I wouldn't even feel pain if I put her in my eye."